Program is Rick Gammon. Rick played a very unusual but pivotal role in this case. His client, Daryl Willard, had an affair with the suspect in the case, Ann Miller, and then he took his own life. But before he did that, he shared details about Ann's involvement in her husband Eric's murder with Rick. Because of the attorney client privilege, Rick wasn't able to share what he had told him with the state. Until that is, the case went all the way to the North Carolina Supreme Court for a ruling that would set a legal precedent in this state. Rick, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Amanda. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Now, this is obviously a very complex case, but first tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you actually started as a police officer, right? Then you went to law school and became an attorney. And really, I mean, I consider you one of the premier defense attorneys, certainly in North Carolina, but probably in the country in terms of some of the cases that you've handled. How did you get from police officer to attorney?
Well, when I originally went to school, I just didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. And so by going to the police department, I would go to court to testify. And I would see these lawyers and what they were doing and thought to myself, well, I can do that. And so it turned out that's what I wanted to do in life. And thank goodness for being on the police department. It sort of opened that door for me.
Yeah, and also it's probably good because you did a lot of criminal defense work. So to be able to understand it from the other side as a police officer probably gave you insight as a defense attorney.
Absolutely. It was critical with regard to my ability to represent individuals. And I often say it was the greatest internship I could have possibly had in order to have to do what I did for a living.
Absolutely. And, this case had so many heavy hitters on it. I mean, Ann Miller was represented by Wade Smith and Joe Cheshire, again, two premier attorneys who are well known not just here in North Carolina, but across the country for some of the work they've done. And you were involved in a lot of high profile cases, but this one's pretty interesting and stands out, I would imagine, to you for a lot of different reasons, right?
Yes, this was probably the most unusual case that I handled from the standpoint that I had information that Colin Willoughby, the then elected DA, needed with regard to the prosecution of Ann Miller for the death of her husband Eric, and it kind of put me in a vice, sort of say I was sort of damned if I did and damned if I didn't.
Yeah, and I mean, so walk this back a little bit. Daryl Willard comes to you and says, "Hey, I had an affair with this woman. Her husband's dead, and I might be implicated because of some of the things that happened." I mean, is that how it went down?
Yes, I mean, he came to me, and obviously we discussed the case. At that point in time, the police were starting to focus in on Daryl and Ann Miller's relationship. And he knew that, and he knew it was just a matter of time before they came to talk to him and interview him.
So how did you get the news that Daryl had taken his life? And I mean, that had to be really difficult for you because even though you didn't know him that well, I mean, he was a client. He was somebody you had met and you knew what had led to this.
Yes, I mean it was very sad, especially under these circumstances. I think Daryl took his life because not because of Ann Miller, but because of his family. Quite
Mhm.
frankly, he knew that things were closing in on him, and that with all the publicity that the case had already garnered, he knew it would be the media would be involved, cameras would be outside of his house, and also, more importantly, that it would center around him to some degree and the information that he had.
And I mean, it's even sadder because I'm sure you, as an attorney, if you had known he was at that point, could have said, "Hey, like, we're going to do everything we can here. If you cooperate, we can probably, put you in a better position."
And we had those conversations, and I was really surprised that he did that. I thought he left. We had several meetings, and I thought he left in a reasonably um, uh, good, place as mentally. But I was very surprised and saddened to hear that he had committed suicide. And I received a call from, and I'd be honest with you, I don't remember who, but someone with Raleigh Police Department called me to let me know that they had found his body.
Um, and I know, again, there's still the attorney-client privilege, but it's been widely reported. It came out in court as evidence. It's a public, piece of information that he had put some arsenic in the beer of Eric Miller at the bowling alley, which made him sick, and then he thought better of it and spilled that beer. So it sounds like he had a lot of remorse for his involvement.
Oh, I think he did. I think he had remorse for his involvement in that regard, and also with regard to having the affair with Ann Miller because of his wife and his kids,
And his young child, yeah.
young child. Yes.
Um, you know, Former District Attorney Colin Willoughby, who prosecuted this case, we talked about the legal community in Wake County, and it's small. It's bigger now, but it was pretty small back then, and it's very collegial. You are all friends. I mean, you're not just people on opposite sides of the aisle. But in the courtroom, you have a job to do. And so this was kind of complicated, I would think, for you because you couldn't reveal this information under the law. And yet you know that you have information that could change the direction of this case. I mean, how hard was that?
It was really difficult. I mean, I have said before I didn't really have a dog in the fight with between Ann Miller's case and Colin Willoughby, but I did want to protect the attorney-client privilege, and I wasn't interested in quote a murderer going free or anything like that. I'm not a defense attorney that believes that everyone's persecuted. And if I could have helped without refusing to turn over the information, I would have. But because of the attorney client privilege and how special it is, I just couldn't do that.
Absolutely. So walk me through this, and I'm going to say what I remember, and you can tell me if I'm correct. But you had this information, and you were ordered to share it, I guess, just with a judge. So that information is now in the court system, but only can be seen by a judge. And then they made this very narrow ruling. I mean, it went all the way to the Supreme Court of North Carolina that said you could release one very small part of it that didn't implicate your client.
That is correct. The first hearing at the Supreme Court and the first ruling was that I had to turn over an affidavit to the presiding judge under seal so that the judge could review it to determine if it was anything material, number one, and number two, whether it's relevant in the case. The judge found that it was, and Judge Stevens ordered me to release the information to the district attorney's office, which I again refused to do. And it went back to the Supreme Court. And at that point in time, the North Carolina Supreme Court ordered me to turn the information over as directed by Judge Stevens.
And I know this was a very long process. I mean, this wasn't something that, it wasn't days and weeks, it was months and months. And you were in touch with Daryl Willard's wife because, she said, "Hey, I'm the executor of this estate. He also told me this information. Why can't you release it?" But it didn't work that way. I mean, it's amazing. I didn't realize until I covered this case that attorney-client privilege extends after death. Correct?
It does. The U.S. Supreme Court answered that question back a long time ago and said that the attorney-client privilege does survive death. In this particular case, that wasn't so much the issue, and the way the North Carolina Supreme Court handled the case, they basically said if the reasons for the attorney-client privilege do not exist, then the privilege doesn't exist, and that's how they base their opinion.
And this, I don't know if this has been used since that time, but I mean, it set a legal precedent to be
Oh,
able to violate that in certain circumstances, in a narrow circumstance.
it did. And one of my biggest fears, and the reason I fought as hard as I did, was because you crack the door open with regard to the attorney-client privilege and having to produce information. And the next thing you know, someone's trying to run a bulldozer through the door, trying to get information from other lawyers in an effort to either prosecute a case or maybe even defend a case. And so the attorney-client privilege has been with us for since America's Constitution. Quite frankly, it's not in the Constitution, but the idea of the attorney-client privilege and information that you give an attorney is sacred. It's been with us for a long time, and it needs to be protected. And I did everything I could to protect it.
So, in the end, you were asked to release one small part. It was called paragraph 9 because it was the ninth paragraph of the affidavit. Do you recall specifically what was in that paragraph?
Yes, in that particular paragraph and the information I gave to Mr. Willoughby, it basically stated that Ann Miller had told Daryl Willard that she had injected some of the arsenic into his IV when he was at the hospital.
And ultimately, what I've learned and what I think the prosecutors learned was that one dose of arsenic kills you. Um, Smaller doses of arsenic can weaken you, can injure you, but that wasn't even the dose that killed him. But still, just knowing that information, I think, made it obvious that she was in the process of trying to kill him.
Oh, I think it was critical, and I'm not sure that case would have ever been brought to trial if that information had not been provided. And again, I got a lot of hate messages and things like that of why was I doing this. And again, I wasn't trying to protect Ann Miller. I was trying to protect the attorney-client privilege, the same as I've tried to protect the Constitution of the United States and the North Carolina for my entire career, which I think now we all see that that's an important, very important thing to do.
You may not remember this, but I think during one of my many, many interviews with you about this case and others, I asked you one time if you asked your clients if they were guilty, and you told me you did not. You said, I'm representing them on the law. If they choose to tell you, that's one thing, but you said, I'm representing them on the points of the law.
Well, I generally would not ask. They may volunteer it, but the truth of the matter is the evidence generally gave me a real good idea
A real good idea of what you were dealing with.
of what I was dealing with. But
Right.
again, my job was not to make a moral decision about what my clients did or didn't do. My job was to make sure that I forced the prosecution to comply with the Constitution of the United States and to be able to prove, if they could, that someone was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, because that's our standard before we will punish anyone in this country.
Right. And everybody deserves, to be protected. And I tell people all the time, they're like, well, what do you think of defense attorneys? I said, I think they're part of the system. And if you got in trouble, you'd want to have a good defense attorney too. The reality is that's the criminal justice system that we have in this country. And it's the only way to be fair. Anne is scheduled to be released from prison in 2029. Do you think she's a danger to the public?
I think anyone who would take it upon themselves to kill another human being the way that she did is a danger to not only society, but anyone that she comes in contact with. Now, I don't know Ann Miller personally, but so I can only go by her actions. And she pled guilty to killing her husband with arsenic. And again, if someone's willing to do that, then you have to really be concerned about what else they may be willing to do.
Do you think justice was served in this case?
Yes, I think so, considering all the circumstances around the case. I don't remember exactly how many years she was sentenced to. Uh,
I think it was 25.
it was 25. I'm sure Eric Miller's family they do not think justice was served. In my opinion, they would not think that. But Considering all the legal ramifications of this particular case, I think it ended up as well as it was going to end up, quite frankly.
Well, thank you so much, Rick, for talking to us about this case today. I'm sure it's a case you'll never forget.
No, I'll never forget it. There are several I will not forget, but this one is the strangest case I was involved in, that's for sure.
Well, appreciate your insight.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you again, Amanda.